Hi, my name is Mike Jones. Today we're going to be talking with Herman Baertschiger about the Oregon statewide wildfire hazard map. Please like and subscribe to this YouTube channel if this helps you out. That helps facilitate you getting proper notifications when new videos come out and helps grow the channel a little bit. I appreciate that very much. Now on with the show. So joining me here again is Herman Baertschiger, current Josephine County Commissioner and former Oregon State Senator. And we're going to talk about the fire map and all of its implications. Now, I was looking over the SB 762, which is what brought the fire map to us. And it says here, wildfire risk map. The bill directs the Department of Forestry to work with Oregon State University to develop a statewide wildfire risk map. The map will categorize properties into risk classifications to help guide wildfire prevention and mitigation efforts.
So now you want the rest of the story. As Paul Harvey used to say.
Right. Yes. So there's certainly. I'm questioning the what guidance is going to be gained in the mitigation of wildfire from this map. But as we look at the state of Oregon, and let me put this on screen here. Basically, the lion's share of Josephine County, which is right there, is basically we're in the red, baby.
So before we go into this, let's give you a little bit of my background. Not only was I in the Senate, I was the minority leader in the Senate, and I was also the chairman of the Oregon Republican Party. And in my real job, I was a wildland firefighter for over 40 years, including wildfire management and also an instructor in wildfire science. So this has always been my wheelhouse. Even in the Senate, I was in the legislature, I was the go-to person for anything to do with wildland fire. Worked very closely with Governor Brown on these issues. When we had big fires, she would call me at all hours, asking questions, and I would accompany her to these big fires and help her understand this. But zoom back out of there. Here's something this is how stupid, and I stupid is a very simplistic terminology, but the methodology here. So you see the Willamette Valley, it's all green.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So if you were to take your car and drive up the Willamette Valley right now, what would you see?
Basically green. I think they grow like grass seed.
So it's all cured out, though. Yeah. The whole valley's cured out.
No, cured out.
That means
dry.
That means if you had 10 matches and you threw one of them in there,
especially on a windy day,
it would only take one. Okay. Yeah. So the probability of ignition is 100%.
Wow.
Okay. That's how bad that is. It's green.
Yeah.
That's how ridiculous this is. So anyways, let's rewind the clock back into about 2015, 16, 17, 18. We had a lot of fires and we were burning up a lot of ground. Now always remember, Mike, when you have to start with the premise that forests grow up and disappear. That's just that. They don't last forever, okay?
Right. Yeah.
They grow up and disappear. And they disappear primarily by fire. Now, when humans started using wood, they got that bright idea, hey, we can start using these trees to build houses and get, okay, so that's another way they can disappear, all right, is you extract them from the forest. But they always are going to grow up and disappear, one way or the other. The problem we have now is people don't understand that. And as long as you have forests, you're going to have fires. Okay, how big they are, how many, that just depends on how many ignition sources, because you can have low fuel moistures, which dictates that. So when a fuel can be dried And the moisture, the extinction of moisture becomes where it can be ignited and stayed ignited. It will every year, okay? Dried fuels. We're talking about dried fuels. So every year we have this problem. But you can have the most extreme fuel conditions and never have a fire because you have to have ignition. Mm-hmm. Okay? So if we wiped all the people off the planet, there's really only one way they can catch fire.
Lightning.
Actually, two. Volcanoes.
Oh, okay, sure.
Okay. Yeah. So Mother Nature. Okay, that's the only other way. So it's man or Mother Nature is okay. So the more people you put into the environment, the more probability of ignition you're going to have.
Makes sense.
That's just how it is.
However, though, aren't most forest fires that happen in this area like lightning caused?
Well, let's back up. Actually, most fires are human caused.
Oh, really?
It doesn't mean that it's arson. It's just has something to do with human activity. But most of those fires are put out in 10 acres or less simply because they're in an area where people are and people realize it.
And they report it.
They take suppression, activities on their own and stuff.
Right, exactly.
The ones that really, really get us are the ones that are started by lightning and sometimes by people in our public lands.
Yeah, because they're quite remote.
Yeah, and the conditions are on that particular day very attractive to ignition and spread. And so you wind up with these huge fires, and then the huge fires in these remote places burn for weeks and weeks, and then they come roaring out into the urban interfaces. And those are the ones that are really... This fire map does nothing to address that. Doesn't address anything to do in public lands. Don't forget the green area in the middle there, Willamette Valley. That's the biggest joke is a person that understands fire behavior and how to model it and all that. I look at that and I start laughing because how did that get kicked out? So all the agriculture land in Grants Pass that are irrigated around here, how come that's not kicked out? How come all the agriculture irrigated land in the rest of the state? That is not irrigated land in the Willamette Valley.
Okay, but it's probably in between Corvallis, where the university is, and Portland,
where the money is.
And so they drive through there a lot, and
you go through there right now, and it's a tinderbox. And I've always waited. A few years back, we had the big fires up in Pendleton on the wheat fields. Same thing. So when that wheat is cured out this time of year, and you get ignition and a good wind behind it, there it goes. And you can't stop a wind-driven fire. You just simply can't stop it. You can't stop it. So again, let's back up. So we've backed up. Now let's go to 2019. I was a Senate Minority Leader, and I had an individual come into my office one day because I was the go-to guy on forest issues and other natural resource issues. And they said, we've come to a memorandum of understanding we signed on to with the governor. So they did this without ever coming to me. They did it on their own. I was so furious that I told them they can leave by window or door, make their choosing. I literally did. And the reason I was so mad is they're getting something in return. Okay? You don't do a deal that's one-sided. And the deal is that they were going to enhance the forest protection rules to make them more restrictive. Okay? So these are large landowners, and there was a whole bunch of other landowners that signed on to that memorandum of understanding.
So to make them more restrictive for who?
For them.
I see.
So they were the riparian areas were going to get enhanced and some other things. So I immediately, as soon as I seen that, I knew they're getting something in exchange. They just didn't tell. They forgot to tell me that part. Okay. Now, how do we pay for fire in Oregon?
Well, I'm assuming it's coming out of the general fund.
A big chunk of it is. Also, the large landowners pay the lion's share.
Oh, okay.
Okay, out of
how does that work?
They pay by acre.
I see.
Okay. So
are they getting charged the same way I, as a small landowner, are, just larger because they own more land, or?
They're getting, the assessments vary from district to district, but it's basically the same way, except they won't have a improvement charge because there's no improvements, under millions and millions of acres.
Sure.
So even if you have 1 million acres and you only charge $1 an acre, that's $1 million a year assessment.
That's right.
So it really adds up. So the lion's share of large fire costs are paid by the large landowners. Then there's an insurance policy from Lloyd of London that's paid out of the general fund. Okay, and I think it's $40 million that the insurance policy is. And I think it's like 6 or 7 million. These are old numbers, so don't hold me to them, okay? You're talking numbers that are already 5 years old. But then if fires exceed that, then it comes out of the general fund in large landowners again. So
so do they after a fire takes place, do they reassess these large landowners to
those assessments
commensurate with the size of the cost?
They come up from time to time for reevaluation. So ODF is pretty much in charge of all of that. So there's different districts. We live in the Southwest Oregon district, and so that district they'll have a meeting, and the people on that board will determine what the assessment is. But what they did, it used to be the districts had their own fire departments, and they still do that in some places. So if you go to Douglas County, they got Douglas Forest Protection Association. So they replace Oregon Department of Forestry there. All right. And because there's so many large landowners, they believe they can keep their assessments down by not having the state involved. Another one is Coos Forest Protection District. And there used to be a lot more. It used to be Klamath. There used to be several, but we're down to about 4, I think, in the state. And then everything else is ODF. So back to the equation. They did something for the governor. What is the governor going to do for them? I believe that when the dust settles and this map is solidified and implemented and everything, they're going to reassess all the properties that are on this map, and they're going to come up with a new assessment. And that's going to pay for that's going to be what's going to be paying for large fire costs. So that'll free up general fund money. That way the legislature got more money that they can go play with.
And their rich campaign financing friends got a break.
And the big landowners, which are now, they used to be mills, but now their insurance companies own all these millions of acres.
Oh, isn't that interesting?
Yeah. That's interesting. So my prediction is that they're going to get a break. There's not going to be near as much general fund money, and the rest of us are going to absorb all the costs. So that meets the goal of the legislature, because they're always trying to free up more general fund. That's how we got the gross receipts tax. Okay, that's freed up general funds so they can go spend it on all their little things they like to spend it on.
Right, and wasn't that if it hit over a certain amount, then you got taxed on it? What was that?
The gross receipts tax?
Yes.
No, that's I call it Oregon sales tax, because that's what it is. The way it is, I take this bottle of water, and so we have a sales tax. I go to the cashier, and they ring it up plus 5% sales tax. Okay, so I see it right there when I buy it. Right. Gross receipts tax, they put the 5 cents on it before it goes.
Yeah. So there's no sales tax, but ultimately you're paying it
it's
anyway.
Sales tax.
Yeah.
It's just before you steal.
Yeah, right.
It's before you take it off the shelf.
You're still paying it.
You're still paying
it, man.
So that's why they did the gross receipts tax. That filled up that, and the same with the lottery. When the Oregon lottery came in the 80s, that was the same deal. Remember it was for schools.
Now they did the same thing in California.
Oh, now it's for everything.
Yes.
I mean,
they promised us we'd have like gold-plated desks and everything. They'd never need for anything again. It wasn't probably 5 years before they were begging for more money.
Yes. So back to this fire conversation. So that's the first thing that they wanted to accomplish. The second thing they're accomplishing in here is by identifying all these areas as extreme, they have the ability to go in and make it very expensive to live there by how to build your house, where to build your house, all those things. And that sets another goal for Thousand Friends Oregon. Depopulize rural Oregon.
Yeah.
No more people out there. And the ones that are out there, it's going to be very expensive. Maybe you want to leave.
Yeah.
So
I'm there, so
yeah.
I'm living this, and a lot of people right here in Josephine County and in other places in Southern Oregon. And for crying out loud, if you look at this map, it's really it's most of Eastern Oregon. Isn't a lot of Eastern Oregon a desert?
Sagebrush burns. It's still got fuels there.
Yeah,
it doesn't burn at the intensity as Western Oregon, but it still does.
Yeah.
So, you know, what else? I think some of the reservations are kind of treated very nicely in there. I think if you blow that up and go to Central Oregon there. Yep.
Yeah, got some green areas in there.
Yeah.
They're not huge.
Nope. So that's quite interesting.
And a lot of this is moderate, but then here's over by Lake County here. You got, these are some pretty big swaths. Are those lakes?
Yeah,
those are lakes.
Anyways, so now let's talk about the methodology behind the map. We just had a meeting here a week ago with Oregon State University or Oregon Department of Forestry.
Yeah, and I can't find that online at all anywhere.
You have to go to the Associated Oregon Counties.
Uh-oh.
It should be, because it was their Zoom call, so
gotcha.
They're in possession, but I think they said they were going to put it up.
Okay.
So yeah, go look at that, because my questioning was.
I'll link that in the description of this video.
They did not like my questioning. My first questioning to the young man, and I say he's young man because I'm pretty sure he's Gen Z, who was explaining all about computer modeling and fire spread and everything. And you got to remember, I spent 40 years doing this. And so when it was my turn to question him, I asked him, my first question is, I said, how many years of wildland fire experience do you have? 0. So he's just a Gen Z guy that went to school, has a computer, and that's why this map is so screwy. He doesn't know what he's talking about. And the other thing, when you do fuel modeling, there's 2 parts to it. One, I asked him what computer programs they were using, and he told me. I wasn't familiar with those, but I'm familiar with the ones I use. It's just a model, and you plug in the ingredients, and then it gives you an output on how the fire is going to spread across the landscape. But if you put in the wrong ingredients, you're going to get the wrong output. I'll give an example. If I put in all the fuel type, the topography, all the ingredients, okay, fuel moistures, all that stuff, I put all those ingredients in there, and then I push a 1 mile an hour wind, the computer model is going to give me a fire that's probably just going to putz along, okay? But if I change the wind component to 20, now I got a rip snorting that's going to move like crazy, okay? So what I'm trying to tell you is if you put the wrong stuff in there, you're going to get the wrong thing. That's just how it is. And I said, how can you model a fire that hasn't happened yet? So when we do fuel modelings for fires, so we have the fire behavior going on. So we come back, we drive out there, we look at the vegetation, we measure the fuel moistures, we do all that kind of stuff. And we take a look at the topography on the map, and we get to our computer and we put all these ingredients in, and then it tells us how that fire is going to move across the landscape, and it gives us time and distance and stuff like that. And then once we get that model, we go back out and we look at the fire, and is the fire doing what the model's doing? If it's not, what did we get wrong? Okay, then we change
do
things.
they model existing fires while they're happening?
Oh, that's how we can tell you. You got 3 days to this subdivision before you're going to burn down. That's how we're doing it.
Oh, okay.
Okay, but you got to verify it. There's no verification. They're just taking a computer and modeling. And like I said, that big green spot in the Willamette Valley that right now in August, September, is so susceptible for large catastrophic fire, especially if they have a wind. If they don't have a wind, it won't be large and catastrophic, but if they get a wind, it will be. It's green.
So all someone would have to do is flick a cigarette out the window, basically.
Probability ignition is probably real close to 100. Yep. So They can have the worst conditions in the world. You could take the driest kindling and put it in your wood stove, and if you don't put a match to it, it's never going to catch fire.
Right.
So, anyways, this map doesn't help us with fire, in my opinion, at all. It doesn't tell us anything that we don't already know. This is for something else, and something else is coming. Trust me, and it's gonna, and you're gonna
something more than what is. I mean, as I see it now, this is rationalization for higher insurance costs. Even though they say it cannot be used for that, its mere existence rationalizes these companies charging more for their services. So,
well, we're going to touch on insurance here in a minute.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that go on in predicting fire. You look at fire history. Some places are more susceptible than fire. So you know the little hill that's over by Rogue River, and you kind of drive around it on the freeway?
Sure.
That's Tin Pan Peak. That burns every 5 years. So you know it's going to burn again. Okay, it just has a long history. It's just the aspects are east, west, and south, and the vegetation is very flashy on there. And so as soon as that vegetation grows, sooner or later it's going to catch fire and it's all going to burn down.
4 or 5 years is all you need.
Yeah, it was my first fire back in the 70s. It was the first fire I was on, and in those days I was swinging a Pulaski. So that's how far back I go. So this meets a lot of goals. So it meets goals of who's going to pay for fire. It meets goals of who or who is not going to live in urban Oregon. And then the third one that it's going to meet is the insurance, and you touched on it.
Okay, so none of this is in service to those who are governed. It doesn't fit into of, by, or for the people here.
No. You know, it's I can look at that map, and it's painted with too broad of a brush. Okay, fire is specific to the landscape, and it's just painted with too broad of a brush. So now the insurance. What's going to happen? In my prediction, the same thing happened in California. So right now, if you want to get insurance on your house and you live in one of these areas, what are you going to do?
Well, there are some insurance companies that are still writing policies, but they're naturally for probably several times more than what you have been paying, or you will pay off your home and own it outright. And you just put sprinklers on your roof and cut the trees way back and hope for the best, I guess. Well,
currently you shop agents. You call an agent or agents. You say, I want a quote, right? And you call several agents. Want a quote. Oh, we don't do it. Okay, and they give you a quote, high quote, or we're just not going to do it anymore. My prediction is the insurance companies are just not going to do it anymore because it's so much more advantageous for the insurance companies to group together so they all have the same risk and they don't have to pay any agents. And the state of Oregon will create a pool.
Yes.
Pool. Okay, and the state of Oregon will manage the pool. And all the insurance companies will be under this pool, and the state of Oregon will set the rate for the pool. So the insurance companies
sound like a mutual benefit society.
It is. They all share the same risk. The state of Oregon's going to set the rate and manage it, and they're not going to have any expenses with agents or anything. They don't have to do that anymore. State of Oregon's going to do it. That's what they did in California. So a friend of mine lives down in Placerville. He's got 5 or 10 acres. And he went from $500 to $2,500 a year for insurance.
Yeah, I own rural Napa property, about 40 acres, and it's, all my neighbors can't get insured.
Yeah.
So,
but there's a pool. There's a California pool.
Yes, and it's insanely outrageous.
Yeah, there you go. Insanely outrageous. That's what's coming to Oregon. So you got the large landowners, you got the state of Oregon, and you got the insurance companies all involved in this. That is my opinion. Let's see how it flushes out over the next 5 or 10 years, because none of this happens quickly. It's always drip by drip by drip by drip. Look at this has been talked about now for over 5 years. and we're still not done with the map.
Right. Yeah, we vacillated back and forth a couple of times where they got some outrage last year, and so then they brought it back and reworked it and gave us this. And
look at the former one and look at this one. Tell me how they reworked it.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
It basically says the same thing.
Right. So, anyways, it's another good deed that the government is doing for you.
Yes. Ronald Reagan said, the 9 most feared words in the English language? I'm from the government and I'm here to help, or something of that nature.
Exactly. So, anyways, this is very political, and there's certain goals and objectives to be made by it. But the least one is how it's going to protect any more after this map is done than it is before the map is done. Because fire has no boundaries. It does what it does.
Right.
It just depends what the ingredients are. Okay.
Okay. So what now?
Well, I
mean,
think,
if you live in these areas, which a tremendous number of people do, they're going to lose their nest egg here.
well, I feel sorry for a lot of those people, especially the people that bought a piece of property 20 years ago and say, hey, when I retire, I'm going to build my log cabin. And no, you're not going to build a log cabin unless they're made out of concrete logs.
Right.
Because wait till when the building codes are implemented, here they come.
Yeah.
And they're not cheap. So it's like I said, we don't know any more about the conditions of the forests from this map than before this map. We don't know. And this
doesn't help firefighters fight fire any more effectively than they already do.
No.
They haven't learned anything here.
No, because we don't know what the on the ground conditions are at the time of the fire. This is all hyperbole. Is that the good word?
Yeah, that makes sense to me. Yes, exaggerated.
Yes.
Yes.
And I tried to ask the guy. I said, so did you put worst case scenario in? Did you put because I can take the modeling and I can change it all day long with just a few keystrokes to give different results. So which keystrokes
you give 1,000 different outcomes.
Exactly.
Well, the thing is that every nightmare circumstance is ultimately going to happen at some point. Mm-hmm. And so models all day long, it's just like climate change, the same thing, that doesn't tell you what is going to happen. It says what might happen if said circumstances exist.
So, we have the fire triangle, it's oxygen, heat, and fuel, make a fire. Then in wildland fire, we have the wildland fire triangle. And what that refers to is how does a fire spread over the landscape? And that is weather, topography, and fuels. Okay, those are the 3 ingredients of how a fire spreads over. So on flat ground, a fire will spread over it. But when you get to steep ground, it's going to spread faster because it's going to preheat as it goes up.
Right.
And then going down the other side, so that's the topography. And of course, wind has the factor that can change the fastest, because the wind can accelerate, or it can get hotter real quick, or it can get more moist real quick.
Right.
So
heat, humidity.
Topography, you're never going to change. It's just what it is, what it is. Fuel types change, but very slowly. So those are the 3. Now they changed it. And I asked him. So remember, it was weather, topography, fuels. This young man, who's never been on a fire in his life, changed it to climate, weather, topography, fuels. Now there's 4.
Yeah.
And
this is the hip thing now, is to blame everything on climate change. But in reality, that young man didn't put that on there. He was instructed to put that on there. I understand how these things work.
Yeah. And I asked him, I said, how does climate? Well, because, he started giving me the climate. I says, okay, stop, time out. How about the Great Fires in 1910? So the Great Fire in 1910, the Northwest burned up. It was the worst part was the panhandle of Idaho, Montana, and Washington. But if it's just that year, it was one of those years, where we call it an alignment of different things. And we had fires all over Oregon, California, Nevada. I mean, it was just a horrible year. Okay. So I said, how did the fires in 1910, was that climate change? Or how about the Tillamook fires? Now, it's not Tillamook fire. It's Tillamook fires. It's plural, because it was a series of fires in the 1930s and 1940s. And it was in the coastal range, which is never supposed to burn.
Right, yeah.
Okay, but the conditions were met in those years that it could happen. And that was old growth forest.
Oh.
It was old growth that burned. So I says, what about those? Or I says, what about the fires of the 1800s up in Maine and Minnesota and Wisconsin and Michigan and in Canada? What about all those fires? You know, was that climate change? And he never did answer me.
It's just a confluence of circumstances.
If fire is mathematical equations, that's all it is. And if the numbers add up, that you could have a big fire and then you have ignition.
Right.
How about the Great Chicago Fire?
Right. Oh, yeah.
Okay, that was perfect conditions. The wind drove that fire. The fuels were all the buildings at that time were wood.
Yeah.
And the ignition was somebody's cow. So kicking over
so
Leonard.
the story goes. Yes.
So the story goes.
Yes.
Yes, Mrs. O'Leary. I think she was exonerated. I really
Can you
do.
imagine living with that one the rest of your life?
Right, but it was wind driven. Okay, wind, and because the topography was flat, so it really wasn't topography driven. That fire was wind driven and fuel driven. Okay, because there's no topography; it was flat. So that's just how it, but we have had fires, and if you look across this world, all over, you know, I was just in another continent, and they're having fires. It was wintertime, and they're having fires. But it's not abnormal. Remember, back to the very beginning of our conversation, if you have forests, you're going to have fire. It's just that simple. Okay, you're never going to be without fire, or the threat of fire, because you have to have the ignition. And people, they're trying to convince people that we'll never have fires. It's especially when about half the state of Oregon are federal lands, and this doesn't address them at all.
Right. Yeah.
So this doesn't address the fire starting on federal lands and then come roaring out of the federal lands onto private lands. This doesn't address it. This is about money and politics.
Okay.
That's what this is about.
So knowing that, what should the average layman individual do? What can they do to mitigate their situation? Are they just going to, sell their rural property to some sucker who'll buy it and move somewhere else that's more friendly to them, or could you launch a initiative process to get rid of 762?
You could do that. That would take a high lift, because the problem
people haven't suffered yet.
Well, the politics is on their side, because the majority of people this map does not affect the population.
So
and
the population that would be voting in that area near the coast.
It's not the coast. It's Multnomah, Clackamas, and Washington's County.
Right, gotcha. So but that's
all the people in the green.
Yes, in the green and in the purple area. Look how much of this area is purple. I'm assuming they rationalize that by coastal influence. There's some of that in the outskirts of Grants Pass, but even some of the outer streets in Grants Pass are in the elevated risk area.
And the Tillamook fires in the 1930s and 40s were in the purple.
Okay.
Okay, and why? So they're not looking at any history. And like I said, all those grass seed fields. There's thousands, hundreds of thousands of acres of grass seed in the Willamette Valley. They're all green. This is a farce.
Okay.
And you're going to pay for it. And the only thing you can do right now is put pressure on your representatives and senators. That's the only thing you can do. But what I'm afraid of is even if all those people in the rural Oregon put pressure on their Senate, they don't have enough votes to do anything.
Right.
Because the vast majority of votes in the legislature are in the green and purple.
Right. Yeah. So that's kind of a screwed up deal.
Yep.
We'll have Dwayne Yunker in here tomorrow, and I'm sure he'll speak to some of this. But so what else? Is that it? Is that it, Herman?
Welcome to Oregon.
Yeah.
This is money and politics. It's not about fire.
Wow.
This is about money and politics. Fire is the excuse.
Yeah. You know what? I moved here 20 years ago. I just wanted to, and I love my house. I love the location. It's in an extreme fire hazard area, as are most of the rest of Josephine County, and I love it. I just want government to leave me alone, and it's done nothing but get more in my face ever since I've got here.
So the people that live in the green and the purple up there at the northern end of the states, they don't like you where you live in. Have you ever dealt with Thousand Friends of Oregon?
No, I haven't.
No, they do not want anybody living outside of cities. Period. That's the 30,000 foot view.
Okay, and just briefly, what's their rationale for that? I mean, I could guess
Environmental concerns.
Right. So people who, as I see it, are part of nature, shouldn't are damning to nature somehow.
Yeah, they don't like it. So
I know a lot of left-leaning people who live in rural Oregon. They're going to have to join with us to do something about this.
They'll vote for Harris.
Wow. Yeah, this is a sad story. I mean, it's like looking at California now. If you expect that at some point they would be fed up enough with the policies that they're living through to do something about it, I would have thought that threshold was some time ago, and yet they're still not moved. Right now, they just proposed something here a couple of days ago where they're going to give $150,000 to illegal aliens to acquire a home, and they don't even have to pay it back at all until they sell the house.
How are they going to pull that off? You can't treat one segment of the population one way and not treat the other. Listen, I think that's all fluff talk because we're in a presidential election.
Sure,
but
why would they be trying to? Why would they be feigning a giveaway to people who are not eligible to vote unless they were planning on registering them and harvesting their votes anyway?
You're catching on. You're too smart. You're catching on.
Well, so they're doing the same thing in Oregon, only it's less. It's like 30,000 or something like that.
Right. And then they're never going to give them the money. It's just like, we're going to pay off all the student loans.
Right,
we're never going to give them the money.
Yeah.
You can't do it. The Supreme Court says you can't do it. You can't treat one segment of the population different from the other. You can't do it. Okay? We're created equal.
Okay.
All right.
Yes.
Supposedly.
Yeah, I remember that from somewhere back in ancient history.
Yeah, your history class in third grade.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so, all right. You're a rural landowner. What do you do? What would you do?
I'd be raising holy heck with my state representative and my senator in my district. You've got to create such a momentum. You remember, our caucus stopped cap and trade. Okay, that was a tax on carbon, basically.
Right. Yeah.
And that's deep. People say cap on tax on carbon. That means like a gas tax. No, that's everything, man. That's natural gas. That's propane. That's electricity. That's everything. And we stopped that. How do we stop that? I'll tell you how we stopped that. It was really going to adversely affect the trucking companies, the timber industry, and some of those industries. And they came to my office one day, and they said, "What can we do to stop this?" And I said, "I need 1,000 trucks." And that Timber Unity was born. And that's what they did. And then that gave us the ability to deny quorum, which they can't do anymore. The Democrats changed that. And we denied quorum, and we stopped cap and trade. And they did. They had over 1,000 trucks at the Capitol.
Yeah, I seem to recall that.
Yeah, just go YouTube it. I remember the superintendent of state police called me, and it was like 20 miles north of Salem and 20 miles south of Salem, 20 miles on I-5 was bumper-to-bumper trucks.
Wow.
It stopped everything.
Yeah, I'd say that's more than 1,000.
And that's what we did. And that's what it's going to take to stop this. And if we don't stop it, the big guys are going to get a free ride, and us common folks are going to pay more money.
But a lot of people are going to leave, and you're going to turn a lot of rural homes into, Detroit, abandoned homes that no one would buy because, what would be
that's
the point
what they
of it?
want.
Yeah, and
that's what they
turn
want.
it into Detroit. But then a lot of those people leave. How do they still maintain? Well, I guess they still, the same regime exists in Detroit. So, yeah, why wouldn't it still exist here? But we're talking about a lot of people.
Yes, but they don't know what's going on. They don't know what's going on.
Yeah, this thing is sneaking up to bite their heels here, and they don't really know.
This is going to be big.
Yeah.
And it's not going to be nice.
Yeah, and I was telling you the other day, I think, unfortunately, it may not be the intended purpose, but certainly it's part of it, is that they don't really want people to have political power. If people have autonomy, if people have money, it allows them to do the things they want to do and unencumbered by government. And that's another thing that I don't think they like. And this is just a side benefit of this, is ultimately going to make people a lot poorer.
Well, it's going to give the state a lot more control over them.
Yeah.
That's going to give the state a lot more control over where they live and how much it costs to live there. And that's the bottom line. And the only people that can stop it are the people. Because I don't think there's enough votes in the legislature to stop it.
That is a sad story.
Yep.
Okay. Well, there you have it, folks. You're up to date. Appreciate you stopping by, Herman.
Hey, no worries. You ever have any questions, let me know. I'll try to do the best I can to answer them. But I sure hope people start paying attention to that fire map because...
you can't ignore politics. I mean, in other countries, you don't have much of a choice, but in this country here, you have a civic duty to pay attention and put educated input on it. And unfortunately, that's in short supply, and this is why we're here in this circumstance.
And, power, money, and politics is nothing new. But now it is new to the way we're going to pay for fire in Oregon. And the people better pay attention. They're not going to be happy when this will not be implemented like overnight. I see a 5 to 10 year it's going to take a while. But it's going to be painful if they proceed like the direction that they're going.
Which all indications seem to indicate.
Yep.
Thank you, sir.
All right. Thank you.